happening tonight in Vancouver.
There's going to be many more stories in the future, and this is Cowes' First Nations moment of our truth.
Another heart-wrenching discovery of hundreds of unmarked graves at a residential school in Saskatchewan.
What do you know and how do you know it?
There's so many ways for you to understand the truth.
Indigenous educators say confirming more residential school mass graves means a reckoning for Canada, including knowledge of and relationships with Indigenous people.
It's a choice a BC basketball player does not want to have to make.
I'm being forced to decide between being a breastfeeding mom or an Olympic athlete. I can't have them both.
The Olympian is out with a plea so she can bring her newborn baby to the Tokyo Games.
This is City News everywhere.
As of yesterday, we have hit 751 unmarked graves.
Another disturbing find at a former residential school site, this time in Saskatchewan. It's the second major find since the discovery of 215 unmarked graves at a residential school in Kamloops, BC.
There's going to be many more stories in the future, and this is Cowes' First Nations moment of our truth.
The 751 graves found represents the largest number discovered at a residential school in Canada. The Maryville Indian Residential School is 140 kilometers east of Regina and operated between 1899 to 1997. Barry Kennedy was taken from his family when he was 5 and shipped to Maryville. His experience reminiscent of stories coming to light from so many other residential school survivors.
This one particular keeper, he would take boys back to that room. Right, and you can hear the, not long after, you can hear this, the screams and the cries for help.
Following the discovery in Kamloops, Cowes began its own search using ground-penetrating radar. That produced 751 hits over 44,000 square meters with a 10% margin of error. Kennedy hopes the discovery might provide answers about a close friend.
One night they come in, they took Brian, and it just, he was my friend. During the day we played, we ate together. He was my classmate. He was someone that, he was my friend. And he just never returned.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission heard from thousands of survivors, many of whom remember witnessing murders and burials of children. It's estimated there could be as many as 6,000 dead children buried in unmarked graves across the country.
I was there. I witnessed a body being put in the ground. It wasn't in a coffin. It was just wrapped in cloth.
The discoveries are garnering international attention and scrutiny, many calling on the Pope to apologize for the role the Catholic Church played. Kennedy wants to see justice for the victims.
When the genocide of Auschwitz took place, they went all over the world looking for all them people and are still convicting them today. How come they're not doing this in Canada? What's wrong with the Criminal Code of Canada? It doesn't apply.
First Nations across the country are now looking to explore other residential schools for unmarked graves. Now, Cowes wants to bring closure for the countless families whose loved ones may be buried at Maryville.
What we are going to be doing now is we are going to be putting names to these unmarked graves. We want to honor our loved ones that lay there today.
Any survivors in distress can contact the Indian Residential School Crisis Line at 1-866-925-4419. In Ottawa, Nigel Newlove, City News.
The band Council, who made the tragic discovery of the 215 unmarked graves near the Kamloops Indian Residential School last month, have put out a statement in support of the Cowes First Nation. In their release, the Kamloops to Shukwamik First Nation says, "We regret that we know well what Cowes First Nation is going through, given the preliminary findings we shared with the world on May 27, 2021. This is only phase one. More investigation is needed. We too have called upon the Pope for an apology. An apology is but one of the many stages of the healing journey." They go on to promise that they will be making some significant announcements regarding the Kamloops Indian Residential School in the near future.
As people grapple with the news of hundreds of bodies buried at the residential school site in Saskatchewan just weeks after the confirmation of unmarked graves in Kamloops, many wonder how to help and what to do next.
Often allies want to get to the doing. Well, what can I do? And that's an important step, but we're not necessarily there yet. We are at the place of holding space for everybody to understand this truth.
Because these unmarked graves aren't news to Indigenous people, just tragic confirmation. So she says, first, listen.
Allow the truths to land in our hearts and in our minds and in our spirits so that we can begin to process the reality of what is unfolding in this place we call Canada.
And we need to not turn away.
It absolutely is a reckoning with ourselves. The colonization and decolonization landscape is really within ourselves.
Peggy Janicki teaches kids and teaches teachers how to teach kids about residential schools. She says we need to examine our Indigenous knowledge and stereotypes and relationship with First Nations people.
Asking, how do I know blank stereotype, right? What informs my knowing? Where did I hear that?
And educate yourself. There are many resources, they say, including the BCTF website. Grace Smith has books geared to younger or new learners. Just don't place the burden, they say, on survivors to explain.
There's so many ways for you to understand the truth. Read books.
At this point, she says, a failure to do so is a decision not to. She says it's important everyone understand the impact of these mass graves mentally and emotionally, because this is the beginning, not the end.
We've just opened the door to probably the greatest atrocity and the greatest act of genocide in this place we call Canada.
For City News in Victoria, I'm News 1130's Lisa Yuzda.
Apologies from the Crown Indigenous Relations Minister after texting a single word to Jody Wilson-Raybould.
The media are all flying in from around the world. Japanese fans are going to be in attendance. The arenas are going to be half full, but I will not have access to my daughter.
Heartbreak and frustration for a woman born and raised in Surrey, now living in Mission. Olympian Kimberly Gaucher gave birth to her daughter Sophie in March.
I'm being forced to decide between being a breastfeeding mom or an Olympic athlete.
In videos posted to Instagram with little Sophie on her lap, she says she's made appeals to all the boards involved. While she says they all want to help, they've also said their hands are tied.
People have told me to try to pump like mad. I don't have enough milk in me to train as a high-level athlete, get my butt back in shape, and feed her currently, all while stocking 28-day supply. We've looked into shipping milk. We've run into some complications. We're still exploring that option.
Now, she's not the only one who's had to ponder this. At least one American Olympian petitioned the Games last month to allow her to bring her breastfeeding child and her fiancé to Tokyo. Meantime, one group can't believe this is still a conversation in 2021.
I understand that we're in a pandemic. I mean, I've been here for the last year. But to me, for a breastfeeding woman who is an athlete to be able to be an athlete, her baby and that baby's caregiver is part of her support team.
Cecily Heslett is the chair of the board of directors for La Leche League Canada. She's also worried about people's comments telling Gaucher to pump milk for Sophie while she's away.
Beyond a certain window of time, which in the first couple of months, a woman's milk supply is established, and this woman's milk supply is established to provide for one baby. And in order for her to feed her baby now, that means she's feeding her one baby, plus pump enough for another baby at the same time. So each day she has to double the amount of milk that she's producing. It's unheard of. It's virtually impossible.
She hopes any of those involved in Gaucher's appeals have a change of heart.
This is an exceptional circumstance, but it's really an important one. We're talking about the health and well-being of a woman and a very small baby. And this is not just, this is not an insignificant request that this mother is making. And frankly, to not permit it is discriminatory. I mean, it's clearly discriminating against women who are breastfeeding athletes.
And in the meantime, Gaucher is hoping for a last-minute miracle.
If anybody knows anything, Let's see if we can make a difference. And it's 2021. Let's make working moms normal.
In Vancouver, Rhea Renouf, City News.
Heat stroke can definitely develop in like 15 minutes.
As we head into a sweltering hot weekend here on the South Coast, be careful if you're heading out onto a local trail. The warning from a local rescue group after a hiker blacked out from the heat.
BC Ferries is returning to its summer schedule tomorrow, and that means extra sailings are being added to account for pent-up demand. The route between Tsawwassen and Swartz Bay will see hourly sailings between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., with added late-night trips after that. There will be 24 sailings per day between Horseshoe Bay and Departure Bay, and 16 sailings per day between Tsawwassen and Duke Point until September 10th. There are 75 new cases of COVID-19 across the province tonight, and 3 more people have died in the last day. 113 people are currently in hospital receiving treatment for the virus. 34 are in intensive care. As for vaccination numbers, 77.5% of all adults in BC have received at least 1 shot, along with 76% of people at 12 and up. More than 1/4 of all adults in BC are now fully vaccinated with both shots. There was a special performance for hundreds of people who showed up for their vaccination appointments at the Vancouver Convention Centre today. A few members of the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra put on a surprise performance in the lobby of Canada Place and followed all of the current provincial health guidelines.
We've done a lot of work with our infection control, and we think that it's great to be inside, great to have the acoustics. They don't have to deal with the elements of the weather, so having them inside has been a really great opportunity.
Everyone's been so supportive and really sweet. It's just nice to see people. One of the silver linings of all these little groups is you really get to connect to people kind of on a personal level, which is sometimes just literally impossible when you're up on stage. So it's been really, really nice, and everyone's been super warm.
It's fantastic. Actually, I was wearing earbuds earlier, and I took them out so I can listen to the VSL. They sound fantastic.
I think for me, if you're feeling any kind of anxiety or anything, it's very calming, very soothing. And it just sets up a really great human kind of environment. Really terrific.
Vancouver Coastal Health says there will be other surprise pop-up concerts at vaccination clinics in the coming weeks. A man has been charged nearly 1 year after an autistic teenager in Richmond was punched in the face and suffered a concussion. The 18-year-old victim was playing basketball with a group of people at Richmond Secondary School on August 21st, 2020, when the alleged attack happened. 2 witnesses described the severity of the teen's injuries to officers who later tracked down the victim in hospital. The teen suffered cuts to his face, one splitting his upper lip. 21-year-old Dominic Rallan Jow, who lives in Ontario, has been charged with assault causing bodily harm. Translink is giving local cities and towns a total of $125 million to upgrade, maintain, or build new walkways, bike lanes, and roads. The money is going towards 131 projects throughout the region, which translate to 2,600 kilometers of road. One of the projects will help the township of Langley construct a multi-use pathway to better connect bike paths to the Golden Ears Bridge, Trans-Canada Trail, and neighboring cities.
I'm gonna miss them, and I know they're here all the time.
The Commercial Drive community comes out to remember a pair of brothers who touched hundreds of lives.
Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carole Bennett has apologized after sending a text to former cabinet colleague Jody Wilson-Raybould, a text that Wilson-Raybould called racist and misogynist. It started when Wilson-Raybould sent this tweet regarding the discovery of hundreds of unmarked graves at the former Marival Indian Residential School by Cowessess First Nation. Wilson-Raybould calls on Justin Trudeau to live up to his 2018 election promises and not hold another election election, referring to widespread expectation that Justin Trudeau will seek another term before the House returns in September. Bennett texted Wilson Raybould's tweet back to her, apparently in the early morning hours, with a single word: pension? Suggesting Wilson Raybould was concerned about securing a House of Commons pension. MPs are eligible for a pension after 6 years, and Wilson Raybould would only qualify if she remains in office beyond October 6th of this year. Wilson Raybould shared the text, saying it reflects notions that Indigenous people are lazy and only want money. Bennett and Wilson Raybould were cabinet colleagues for 4 years before Wilson Raybould resigned during the SNC-Lavalin affair, an incident which saw Wilson Raybould first demoted, then thrown out of the Liberal Party. This after Wilson Raybould said she felt that as Attorney General, she was pressured by Justin Trudeau and his office to offer a lighter punishment to SNC-Lavalin. The company faced charges of bribing Libyan officials and illegal donations to Canadian political parties. Bennett later tweeted that she offered her apologies directly to Wilson Raybould, saying she allowed interpersonal dynamics to get the better of her, admitting the text was insensitive and inappropriate, and saying she regrets her actions. Now, City News reached out to both Wilson Raybould and Bennett, hoping to get a sense of what happened here, but both have declined interviews. In Ottawa, Xiaoli Li, City News.
I knew my brothers were well known. Victoria and Vancouver. I'm gonna miss them.
Anyone who has spent time in Vancouver's Commercial Drive knows Frank and Danse, and the community is remembering them at a memorial Wednesday night.
It's really, really hard. It's too much for me right now.
An immensely difficult day for the siblings of Frank Sonny Williams and Randy Danse Williams. The two brothers passed away within weeks of each other and are now being honored by the entire community. They were known as the friendly faces who spent years out front of Home Hardware, carving, petting passing dogs, and chatting with their neighbors.
They are always wanted to make people happy, to share their stories, especially with their art. They want to share why they do what they do.
Music was played and stories were shared. Frank and Danse were both survivors of the residential school system, and their sister says she was always amazed at their strength and positivity.
They taught a lot about forgiving, learning how to forgive, and not hold on to your past, just to move forward. Put your past in your past and move forward.
Melanie Mark, the MLA for the riding that includes Commercial Drive, says she loved running into the brothers and having a laugh.
I know why they sat on the streets. Not everyone knows why. They also had homes, and they told me where their homes were, and they loved their homes, but they love sitting on the drive and harassing people like me. Melanie, what are you doing? Get over here. And I love those moments. And I'll cherish those moments.
So this is really not surprising. Of course I spoke to everybody on the drive. You know, I mean, I knew that he knew just about every dog's name that he, you know, if I was talking to him and puppies would go by, he'd say the dog's name. So of course he knew their owners.
Frank and Dance's family were overwhelmed by the number of people who came out to show their love and support for their brothers.
To see this support is very appreciative, very nice.
There are plans to erect a permanent plaque to memorialize the two brothers who spent so much of their time meeting new friends outside the Commercial Drive hardware store. In Vancouver, Ashley Burr, City News.
This has been our busiest year to date. A lot of the calls that we've been responding to have been preventable.
If sunshine and hot temperatures have you planning to hit the trails over the next few days, rescue crews say there's a good chance they'll have to pull you out of the woods with the calls they've been getting for hikers struggling under the burning sun. Once it boils up to the mid-30s this weekend, even the most experienced hikers don't usually stand a chance.
We really want to just stress to people to bring extra water, make sure you're hydrated before you go on your hike, and make sure you do the research on the hike to make sure it's appropriate to your fitness level.
Crews rescued a hiker who blacked out under the burning sun on Mount Hanover Tuesday night. The hiker passed out 3/4 of the way through the trail and didn't have enough food or water. Shortly after, crews were called to Crown Mountain for an exhausted hiker that was vomiting. This runner at Lynn Canyon Park in North Vancouver is sticking to a quick 5K and is taking some precautions.
I normally have my dogs with me, but they're not able to come with me today. But other than that, no, just keep it nice and easy and lots of water.
Very good advice to avoid vigorous activity when you're outdoors, especially because you don't know how susceptible you are necessarily to heat illness. And when you're in the sun, you can become overwhelmed with heat very quickly, even if you're an experienced hiker.
It's not just the heat. Air quality is also a concern. Metro Vancouver is watching the data and expects to issue an advisory this weekend.
This is certainly a situation where ground level ozone becomes a concern when temperatures rise like this. Ground level ozone is formed with a mixture of sunlight, hot temperatures, and regional emissions.
Howe notes the worst periods for breathing is when the ozone peaks late afternoon and early evening. North Shore Rescue has already responded to 90 calls this year. And if you're planning to hike this weekend, they expect you'll be adding to that total.
Yeah, I mean, that's setting us up to basically destroy our record of 151 last year.
In Vancouver, Crystal Ladiris, City News.
It's been a bit of an emotional roller coaster since then.
Canadian swimmer Brent Hayden retired from competitive swimming after winning bronze at the 2012 London Olympics. In 2019, he came out of retirement in hopes of making it to the Olympics one last time to represent his country. On Monday night, he did just that, booking a time of 21.82 seconds to win the 50-meter free at the Olympic trials and is now on his way to Tokyo.
I was incredibly happy with it, but it kind of comes through waves where what you realize you've accomplished kind of like the weight kind of hits you differently as different times.
The celebration only lasted so long. The following night, the 37-year-old was supposed to compete in the 100-meter freestyle, but had to withdraw from the race because of intense back pain.
Just with the quick turnaround, my body, I think, was just neurologically fried. And so that manifested in just a minor spasm, but it was 100%. And my coach and I made the decision to pull out because it would be better to heal now and recover and be ready for Tokyo.
Hayden has been open about his struggles with depression, which is what ultimately led to him retiring almost a decade ago. But now he's back and hoping to enjoy the moment in Tokyo.
There's always that voice in the back of your head that says, oh, what if it doesn't go right? Or what if that, but you just learn to kind of talk back to it in a way, and just kind of like, well, what if it goes right? How amazing would that be, right? And trying to focus on that. So I'm not worried about that. Like, it's just something it's been there my entire life, and I've always learned to cope with it. And a lot of times, actually, when I do have those voices of self-doubt, it actually fires me up even more to prove my own inner voice wrong.
For City News, I'm Lindsay Dunn.
Vancouver's news is always available on the radio with News 1130 or online anytime at citynews1130.com. Your next edition of City News is tonight at 11 o'clock. Thank you for watching and have a great night.